In September 2018, a major planning inquiry was held into the refusal of two planning and two listed building consent schemes for the extension and conversion of the Royal High School on Calton Hill in Edinburgh into being a luxury art hotel. The association, working together with Edinburgh World Heritage and Newtown Broughton Community Council, formed a coalition of objectors to present evidence in front of this inquiry. Now, it should be remembered that Thomas Hamilton's Royal High School, built in between 1825 and 29, is perhaps one of the most important Greek revival buildings in the world, not just the country, and is the building that perhaps provided the greatest link to the moniker, the Athens of the North, for the city. And it comprised a powerful symmetrical grouping of principal Doric flanking pavilions, flanking colonnades, and subsidiary kind of temples, fully exploiting this picturesque kind of site on the edge of Calton Hill, dominating the kind of southern prospects of the kind of city. Its role complements the National Monument and other monuments on Calton Hill, creating this physical example of the Age of Enlightenment and of nationhood through architectural style and content. Public inquiry considered substantial amounts of kind of evidence into the suitability of the case into converting this iconic building into a hotel. And it's not my intention in this brief presentation to go over the scope of all of that kind of evidence and the kind of issues, other than the note that most organizations on either an international, national, or local level of heritage organizations of the City of Edinburgh Council, of the state's own heritage agency, Historic Environment Scotland, to local community councils and local groups, all objected to the proposals, which resulted in the refusal of planning consent on two different occasions by the council. Now, there were a few wins that actually came out from the public inquiry that's kind of worth kind of sharing. And it's particularly in the context here at the beginning of June in 2020, that we now know that the report from the Department of Planning and Environmental Appeals has now been passed to Scottish kind of ministers for decision. And there's a few interesting things that came out that are kind of worth sharing and just noting. First of all parties who attended the inquiry agreed that Hamilton's former Royal High School is one of the finest examples of Greek revival buildings in the world and is of international significance. The assessment that was made of the impact of the proposals on the outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Site was also incomplete in its analysis, and in many places had been underplayed as to perhaps not emphasize the degree of impact that the proposals would actually make. A point of debate through inquiry, of course. And it was accepted by all parties that both schemes would, not may, but would have an impact on the heritage value of the kind of buildings by Hamilton and its setting. Now, the extent of that impact was an aspect of great debate throughout the inquiry, but it was accepted that there would indeed be an impact. The inquiry also heard that it was not possible to define what an ultra-luxury or a luxury art hotel was in any meaningful manner that it could form a controlling part of any condition to any planning consent. It was all about style and nuance and furnishings and artwork hanging on the walls. It wasn't something that could be controlled or regulated going forward, as things may change, as they may well do. Much play was made in the run-up to both planning applications, through the whole process and through the public inquiry, of the new customers that would be brought to the city, people who had never come to kind of Edinburgh because there wasn't a quality enough establishment for them to attend. And these would be the ultra rich and the ultra kind of wealthy, who would bring significant volumes of business into the kind of city. Well, in the testing of the economic evidence, it was determined that some 86% of the hotel's occupants would indeed be cannibalized from existing Edinburgh hotels, and only 14% would actually be new business. Therefore, the economic value to the city was much, much less than had actually been stated. And it was no more than the equivalent of a modest commercial developments, such as one that's being erected on Morrison Street time. So in no way could the impact of the heritage of the buildings and the impact on the architectural masterpieces could be offset by the economic national significance of the properties. And indeed, it's barely of regional significance, let alone local as well. And almost as a little bit play that came out, or a little side point that came out from the inquiry, was who is actually in control of the development. And it may seem a bit kind of esoteric, but it's about the confidence of the potential of implementation. So the inquiry heard that actually the controlling body behind Calton Hill Hotel LP, which was the joint vehicle being promoted for it, wasn't actually Duddingston House Properties and Urbanist Hotels, who were actually the appellants in front of the inquiry, but was actually a combination of an American investment company, Oaktree Capital Management, who had something like 97% of the controlling interest, and another vehicle, Craig Investments, which just had a number of smaller players in it, which is based in the tax haven of Luxembourg. And that the management operators, mostly through the people operating, would be the people operating the hotel, would simply have a management contract going forward, adding, as a result, a degree of uncertainty as to how the scheme would actually be implemented. Well, the inquiry reconvened to hear kind of additional policy evidence in early 2019. And as I've just said, is the recommendations from the report are now in front of Scottish ministers for their decision. But things have moved on since the inquiry could have ended. In late 2019, the Edinburgh Hotel Association reported that there was now an oversupply of hotel bed spaces in the city, creating challenging trading conditions for all operators during the entire year, with the exception of the very peak of the kind of festival season. So in effect, Edinburgh was now well catered for in terms of hotel provision, regardless of whether it needed a new player to kind of enter into a different category, which is still to be determined or ill-defined. And of course, even from late 2019, things have moved on. The utter devastation, the horrible devastation of the city's tourism and hotel sectors as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic is hugely distressing, and has seen virtually the collapse of the kind of industry as we know it today. And as we begin kind of planning for our routes out of lockdown, it's generally being accepted that the new normal will not be the old normal from even a few months ago, and that there will be significant changes to how the city operates, particularly in terms of tourism, and maybe how the festivals work as we deal with issues of social distancing, kind of, etc. So I think it's fair to say that as a result of some of these changes in the market and the huge impact of COVID going forward, changes the business case supporting the proposed conversion of the Royal High School into a luxury kind of hotel. Now, it should be noted at this stage as well that what we advocate is for Scottish ministers to actually recognise the potential damage to not only the buildings, but to the reputation of the city as a World Heritage City that these proposals represent, and to refuse consent. But in doing so, to recognise the fact that there is an alternative ready and waiting to be implemented to give a new life to Hamilton's Royal High School. The Royal High School Preservation Trust, working with the St. Mary's Music School, have actually won planning consent and listed building consent for the reuse of the school to be a new music school, which would be a fantastic addition into the civic life of the city. And it's also a scheme that has attracted significant donor support already, to the extent that the building proposals are largely fully funded and are ready to go. So by refusing consent to the hotel scheme, it then enables a scheme to come forward, which would work much more comfortably with the building and with the city, and for which consent already exists. But it's not just this kind of local, this isn't just a little debates within the heritage bubble of Edinburgh, which has been so often kind of highlighted as just being the Edinburgh lovies of great concern. And it's worth noting, just in conclusion, that on the 24th of March 2017, A group of American architects, including the Dean of the Yale School of Architecture and the Dean of the Notre Dame School of Architecture, wrote an open letter where they could have noted that Hamilton's seminal masterpiece is perhaps the foremost building in the world which influenced the development of an American architectural style. And in considering the proposed conversion to a hotel, they said, and I quote, "The proposal to overwhelm the hillside masterpiece by engulfing it in a wholly unsympathetic modernist hotel complex is an act of artistic vandalism." We in the Cockburn Association would agree with them. And we call upon Scottish ministers to refuse planning and listed building consent to the proposals to convert the Old Royal High School into a hotel.